Welcome to Embedding Communication and Inclusive Instruction.
We are so happy to be here with you today, our people.
Right.
This is so terrific.
We're making an accessibility promise to you today because we want all classrooms and virtual spaces and presentations to be as accessible as possible, following the principles of universal design for learning, which is also one of our themes for today's session. And so I want to point out some things that we're modeling that you too can do when you're presenting or teaching with your students or presenting to your colleagues. You can include simple backgrounds with sans serif, high contrast, real fonts in your presentations, meaning we're not using images of font. And if we do, we make sure to add alt text to all of our pictures, which is actually number 3 on this list, because alt text makes sure that all of our images can be accessed by those visually and those auditorily that might be using something like a screen reader. You do have automatic captions today provided by Project Success in Zoom, so know that those are available to you. Also, there'll be digital materials provided for your use. You'll see some QR codes today to access a survey. There'll be lots of resources and visual examples. And as Mary stated at the beginning, we do want you to participate and ask questions. So if you have a question relevant to the content at that time, feel free to chat it or unmute and ask your question verbally. If you have any issues accessing the presentation visually today and you need a different copy than what's provided in the handouts of Sketch, let us know.
Fantastic. So we'll get the ball rolling. Just a quick introduction of both of us today. My name is Rachel Heron, and I am the specially designed instruction facilitator for Earlywood and the surrounding schools. So about 6 school districts in southern Indiana. Not southern Indiana, south of Indianapolis. And my passion is communication. My degree is in students with significant disabilities. And I have a firm belief that we shouldn't let kids graduate without figuring out the way that communication can be present for all of them. So that's my passion and my excitement. This is contact information for me. And Jenna?
Yeah, thanks. I'm Jenna Fallbush, one of the Patins training specialists. And similar to Rachel, I am very passionate about inclusive instruction, and that communication is a huge part of that. I, before coming to Patins, taught Gen Ed 3rd grade, and since I've come to Patins in 2015, I've just had all of those aha moments where I could have been better supporting the students in my classroom when it comes to communication and all of their access to the content. So I'm very grateful to be here with Rachel and talking to you all today. I want to point out that our theme throughout our session is equity in inclusion. And we know that inclusion doesn't always provide an equitable environment. We have to still be very intentional about inclusion, because just putting people in an environment doesn't make it inclusive. So I like using this image or this graphic that you've all most likely have seen before, this famous baseball image that I've edited a little bit. To work for our needs. So here on the left-hand side of this progressive image, we've got these 3 kids standing on the same size box to look over a wooden fence in order to watch a baseball game. And unfortunately, this kind of traditional model where everybody gets the same thing, only 2 of the 3 students have access to visually watch the game. The 3rd student is still stuck behind the fence and cannot see. So we need to progress our thinking into that UDL framework where we remove all barriers when possible. So I progressed to the center image here where we've removed the barrier of the wooden fence, and now they can stand on the ground behind the chain link fence and all watch the game safely. But today we're talking about embedding in communication, and we're always talking about specifically designed instruction as it is incorporated into universal design for learning. So I point out here in this graphic on the right that sometimes we have to provide additional supports for our students to really meet them where they are, to meet their needs. And so here we have the tallest student who has some binoculars. You know, he's cheering right now, but he's got binoculars so he can really tune into the game to see and improve his visual access. The student in the center doesn't need anything other than just removing that barrier of the wooden fence. And then we've got The shortest student, actually he needs to sit in a chair, or maybe it's a wheelchair, and he still has access now to the game based upon his needs. So we're really talking about that universally designed and specially designed instruction for our kids when it comes to embedding communication in our inclusive classrooms. We do have 3 objectives for you. The first is to identify at least 2 strategies for creating inclusive opportunities to communicate authentically in the classroom. Secondly, we want you to be able to describe the roles and responsibilities of our students' knowledgeable others, because those individuals in our classrooms, paras, other parents sometimes, student volunteers, when the student leaves the classroom and goes to the cafeteria or goes to the office, those are all knowledgeable others, and hopefully they're all on board with what we're doing in the classroom for consistency. And thirdly, of our objectives, we want you to be able to identify at least 2 tools and or strategies to support that verbal and written communication in an inclusive setting. So to get those things done, we're going to start with setting the stage for communication through universal design for learning, and that's when Rachel will take us away. Secondly, we're going to talk about communication with visuals and the importance of visuals in our classrooms. Third, we're going to talk about speaking and writing before we wrap up. So we've got a little quiz. Are you ready for this pop quiz?
I told there'd be a quiz.
Right? Now this is for you all to kind of assess where you are at the beginning of this session, as opposed to maybe where you end the session in your minds and your mindset. So this can be totally personal. You don't have to chat this out. This might just be something you jot down on a piece of paper, or even in a, open document on your device. Just whether or not you feel that these next statements are true or false. So first, true or false, strategies to include those with the most significant disabilities in an inclusive environment benefit most, if not all, students. So go ahead and record how you feel, true or false. Next, true or false, building in communication must be planned well in advance. True or false? I see some participating in the chat too. I love putting yourselves out there and becoming a part of that group communication. And third, students have to know the 26 letters of the alphabet before they can write independently. True or false?
I hope our expressions aren't giving away the answers.
All right, so let's see. We'll come back to those questions at the end to see if anything has shifted in your minds. All right, here we go. Rachel's on to universal design.
Absolutely. So thanks, Jenna, for getting us started. And those of you who know either one of us, and I know that we know lots of people out there, one of the other passions that we share mutually is universal design for learning. And I want to just start out by saying that in your area of expertise, this is maybe one of the most gray areas when it comes to how people instruct and talk about universally designed strategies. So if you're not familiar with this term, it's okay. It's probably because it hasn't gotten to you yet in your classroom. And Jenna and I both love to talk about this. So of course, reach out to either one of us to talk about it. But universal design for learning, the concept came from universal design in architecture. So back in the day when architects all over the country decided, or all over the world decided, that they were no longer going to create buildings that did not have access for people to enter, they had a new idea of what needed to happen, which was you need to incorporate access to the building for somebody who can't walk, for somebody who might just need a ramp or a different way in. Part of the beautiful design of the way that that looks, because it doesn't have to be a rickety ramp that's slapped up the back of the building. And the side, on this side, you can see the picture. And even though the other picture of this beautifully designed architectural ramp kind of creeps me out a little bit because there aren't enough rails for my liking, it definitely shows that, you've got the steps for the people who need the steps. There's a ramp for people who need the ramp. And it thinks about all of the people that might be entering the building before a single brick or mortar is laid for this foundation. And so, Jenna, if you'll flip to the next slide, when we moved this to education and the way that we think about including students and communication and in the classrooms and making sure that everybody is considered, we also take a universal approach. We're thinking about the way all kids participate before we even walk into the classroom. And if you have things that are set up that are already there, then who gets to be a part of that? Everybody. And so these are a few pictures of just some areas around our state that have that universal design for learning and experiencing life together down pat. Children's Museum, huge. You know, since I was a kid, donkeys years ago, they have had this ramp that goes up. It doesn't matter if you're strolling up with your child, walking up in a wheelchair, on a scooter, you can access all of the floors of that building because there's a ramp that encompasses all of it. And then all of these amazing playgrounds that are popping up. Who likes to play on playgrounds who are accessible for kids? All kids, you know, I mean, if you can have, I know, right? Shocker. Everybody likes to be included. So these are just some examples around our state of what that might look like out in the environment, and then thinking about setting the stage for our environments in the classroom. So setting the stage, we have lots of different things that we're looking at when we're setting the stage for your classroom environment. And the first one is a communication-rich environment. So you are really thinking about how kids communicate and how you can incorporate that communication in every single environmental experience. Viewing students as communicators, presumed competence. I know Ashley Quick is giving a session right now in the other Zoom room about presumed competence, but thinking about our students as communicators instead of visualizing them in a different mode or not having those high expectations, which is number 3, holding high expectations to encourage all of that risk taking, and then creating all of these different opportunities for students to be able to utilize their communication, because who wants to talk in a group? Who wants to participate? Most everybody, right? So ensuring knowledgeables, for people who are in charge of communication, making sure that those people are they're part of the communication process is another huge step. Engaging students through personalization, visuals, and choice. I know I like choice. And then my very favorite, celebrating all attempts. So we've got some classroom examples of what this looks like. You know, at Greenwood, I work in lots of different school districts, but Greenwood has it down. Middle school core word of the week. They have that core word up there where they're talking about communication, what they're focusing on. There's lots of different opportunities for students to participate universally, whether it's seating, whether it is a way to set up a different way to access your materials in class, whether it's the alternate spinner. I love that. That's the second picture down, where it just gives kids an opportunity to participate without having to use what other kids use, which is that verbalizing, that vocal communication. That's not always the way that communication pans out. So those are just a few of the classroom examples. And then beyond the classroom, and I'm going to brag for a second, and I don't know at this point if any of my peeps from Greenwood schools are on here, but this year their industrial tech class, led by an amazing man named Mr. Figgy, created communication boards for the playground that are, as you can see in these pictures, and no, the kids do not have smiley faces. We were just being protective in private. Well, they are smiling, but not quite like that. But these roll out, they're on wheels, they go into the cafeteria, they go out into the playground, just making sure that kids have access. And if you notice in the picture on the far right, those are not kids who are part of our special education program. Those are just kids out there using the board to communicate because it's fun and it's different and it showed up on their playground and they were super excited. So just a couple of different examples of how you could possibly incorporate that out into the world. So let's move on to something else. We have a Minimeter survey for you, and we would love for you to participate. So we have, you can either access that at www.menti.com, or just open up your phone and hold it like I'm getting ready to over the QR code. If you open up your camera, you should be able to hold it over the QR code and have a link open up for you. And the question is, what are the most common words that we use in our language that are not nouns? So take a second to do that. And thanks, Jenna, for putting that code in the question box or in the text box.
If anyone would like the QR code back, just chat it out or verbally let me know and I'll get that back.
So words that are not nouns, but there are common used words. All right, we're seeing these roll in. This is a free tool that we love to use. We love to use it. Oh, Meredith said lots of wonderful things happening in Greenwood Community Schools. I could not agree more. And a lot of our schools around the state are taking this bull by the horn. So it's so exciting to see. All right, look at this. No, yes. Look, as the words get used over and over again, you can see them pop up. I know, Kara, right? Those boards for the playground, genius. And the teacher, I'll talk about this while you're putting your answers in. The teachers in the special education program and our SLPs got together with the idea, but Mr. Figge, the industrial tech teacher, took his students and they created those boards. All of the students together created those boards. It was a really huge community effort, which is so cool. We hope to get them in the other elementary schools next year. All right, look at this. So we're getting a lot of the words that I probably would have said that were our most commonly used words as well. All right, so looking at reflecting what you just said versus the core words. So the words that a lot of you probably are very familiar with that are our most commonly used words. And this is a list that was part of a Banji survey that they created that shows the percentage of the first 26 core words that are utilized by most toddlers. So toddlers say these words over and over again. And you can see the number one is I. I'm not sure that that's a shock to anybody. No is the next one. I'm pretty sure that's not either. Interesting enough, when Jen and I were talking about this before, we found a survey that talked about the 25 most commonly used words that college students texted, and they were very similar as well. So pretty funny. So if you hop down to the next list, which is the sample of the core boards, a lot of you utilize these in your classrooms already. We have a link to the free core boards that are on here, but I think it's really, really important that we think about having core boards everywhere. I worked in Edinburgh in the preschool program for a long time. And one of the coolest things that happened the year that I was working with the teacher was she used a core board when she was just doing instruction. She had it up and it slowed her down enough for kids with processing issues to be able to follow along. So it was utilized by more than just the students who needed the visual, but she was following along and pointing to the words on her core board. And we plastered the elementary school with core boards at that point, so that every time a student showed up into a cafeteria, a music room, in the hallway waiting for the restroom, that there was a core board there telling them that it was okay to have communication there. And lots of kids took notice of that and liked to use it as well, because not being able to verbalize your communication is not the only reason why you might use it. All right.
Yeah, I love the idea of putting those core boards everywhere. And that's a huge part of our visual communication, as you were pointing out, for those kids that aren't using their voices or maybe can't use their voice at that moment. We're traveling with a friend who lost her voice, and she had her AAC app ready on her device so she could communicate if she needed it at the airport when she was coming home.
Yeah, I forgot that.
Yeah. The visuals are a huge part of our communication. And I actually was recently, looking for some information, and this is a pretty common statistic that you've probably seen before, but I thought it's a good one to always bring back into our mindsets, that 55% of our communication is visual, and the other 45% is divided between vocal and verbal verbalizations. So much of more than half of our communication is visual, and we need to be thoughtful then about the visuals we're including around our schools, for those knowledgeable others too, and for students in all environments, and then also in our classrooms. And we want to be really intentional about the visuals we're using, and that in the ways that we're making sure that the visuals make sense for our students, right? Because we're not creating environments for us. We have our homes and the places we live to create our personal spaces. Our classrooms are for our students, and we need to be thoughtful about what they need. So take a moment and reflect on the visuals that maybe you're using, and feel free to chat with us, or if you want, in the Zoom toolbar, if you have access to the annotate feature, there are stamps. And so if you click on annotate and then you click on the stamp feature, you could actually checkbox some of these if you use them in the classroom. So what visuals are you using? Are you using visual schedules? How about first then schedules? Oh, I see a heart of first then. I love it.
Oh, first then, yep.
Visual boundaries and sample pictures. So when you have students that, need some spatial boundaries and samples of what that space should look like based upon their organization and their needs, not the way you want it again. Those visuals are helpful. How about social narratives?
Oh, I love it.
And digital social narratives are wonderful visuals for supporting communication, for supporting all types of access. 5-point scales, video models, task boxes. Oh, I love all the stamps coming up.
Yeah.
Traveling visuals. So taking those visuals with you, with the student, especially I'm the elementary mindset person because that was where I came from. So when the kid goes to PE, is that person on board? Do they have visuals? And that goes down with reminders for staff, making sure they know how to use those visuals. Power cards are another visual. That's my Grogu in the bottom right. He says, Grogu wants you to stay at your desk.
I would
So
totally stay at my
cards.
desk for Grogu. I totally would.
Right? So I see lots of interaction here and you're using visuals. If you see something on here that you haven't tried yet, consider maybe your students coming in for next year and whether or not, those visuals might change or the addition or deletion of visuals that you've been using.
Absolutely. And if you have something in here that you haven't used already, please put it in the chat box and we'll add it. We will add it for you.
Yeah.
Love it.
We share here a resource with 6 different ideas for creating visuals, very simply and easily, because sometimes we need them on the fly. Other times we have a little more time to create them. So I share firstly, lessonpicks.com has free shares available. Otherwise, Lesson Picks is $36 a year. I don't work for Lesson Picks or anything. It's just one of those resources that I like, the free share, and it's so affordable for most school districts to provide that for you. Core vocabulary and free printables. So some of those core words that we were saving or that we were talking about earlier, and those printables that we shared. So like, here's a sample of one of those core words that I just stuck in a pocket protector. So lots of free printables for that quick access around the classroom, on the fly, on the go. You can also cut off labels of things, of food items or different materials and attach those to cardboard for quick, on the fly visuals, making choices. PowerPoint, Google Slides, make-believe comics. I love using and considering comics for communication because sometimes that's the best way students engage and that they show us what they know is through that style of communication. And I also list for you some free images or free image resources like Pixabay, the Noun Project, and Unsplash for grabbing free images that are copyright free, and you can some would like you to attribute to the photographer, but other times you can just post it right into your materials without any worry of stealing someone else's graphic.
So I also wanted to mention, and I'll put the link in here if I can think of it, the rip-proof paper, because there is waterproof, rip-proof paper that you can print core boards on, because I found you also need core boards or communication that is low-tech in the bathtub, in the pool. There are lots of different ways. Or if you have it in a situation, and I know that you will never do this, but other bodily fluids might come in contact with it, So definitely something that I'll put in the chat box or we'll add to the presentation. All right, so just in time. And do we have SLPs out there? We did not ask who is out here. If you're an SLP, shoot us a little text in the text box just saying, I'm here. There we go, super. So I've been working with SLPs across our districts and hello. And I am always amazed at how much I don't think like an SLP. I'm not as typically organized in my way that I process things, but I know that one of the barriers that we've been facing is what happens when new content gets added, because you're so much of the time in charge of programming the materials and making sure that kids have access to different pieces on their communication devices so that they can participate. And what I would like to introduce is the idea of just-in-time programming or just on the fly programming. It doesn't have to be pretty. It can provide flexibility to a lesson when you have surprise content that's there, and it can help you prepare when content changes. Because as we know in conversation, even today during our presentation, we occasionally have something happen where you have a veer off in conversation. So you can take a Post-it note and just add a simple drawing, slap that next to what the student is working on their device. You can pull in, if you're working on the mitten, draw a picture of the mitten and use that as a just-in-time piece of information. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be prepped. It just has to be inclusive of the conversation. One of my favorite things. Awesome. And also, there are several different steps that we can have that talk about encouraging communication. So we have, I have a resource that I've attached to the end of it, and it's a study that was done in Naperville that is really great. It's like 57 of their best resources for inclusive communication in the classroom. But when you have a kiddo in the classroom, and this little kiddo in this picture is one of my students that I work with in one of my elementary schools. He's a rock star. He has a communication device. He has a trach. He uses a compilation of sign and communication device. And his teachers at his school were really trying to think about how to give him opportunities to be more interactive in the classroom with his device. And one of his teachers came up with the most amazing resources, which was the Blueby Pal. They checked it out from the Patins project. It's a lion that can be hooked up to that AAC device. And when this student types in what he wants to say, the lion says it for him. And look what happened. I mean, immediately he was surrounded by other students who wanted to be a part of that experience. That right there is a huge opportunity for connection, and really what we're looking for when we want our kids to be included in and considered in the classroom. Routines. Setting up routines, and we're going to talk more and more about this as we go, and Jen is going to cover some of the other topics, but having a routine in your classroom where it's predictable helps open up the door for more communication opportunities, because you know what's going to happen, so you know that things can be there. You could use that spinner, that we saw on another slide, to be able to push back into that information that's being presented then, or just give opportunities for conversation. When I was watching several people talk about their experiences with using AAC in the classroom as adults looking back, they said that having a teacher be able to having their teachers understand what's on their communication devices so that they can answer on the fly and be a part of that communication is also really, really huge. So that can really be built into a routine. And then modeling wait time. One of my hardest things, because I don't know if you've noticed or not, but I like to talk, and I talk without taking a breath. So having that appropriate amount of wait time for somebody who might be moving slower in the conversation to access is huge. And then prompting, and Jen is going to talk a lot about this prompting as well.
Yeah, I just want to point out, like you were saying, that creativity of using the Blueby here. That's part of embedding this communication in for all of our students. It's not giving up on them as communicators, continuing to see them as, presuming competence, they are communicators, and we can figure it out even for our kids with the most significant needs, because all students have something to say. Like we see in these images here, students working together to chat. In the bottom right, in addition, we have an AAC device there, because there are different methods and preferences for communication. But what we have to do is figure out how to make sure that all of our students have a voice. And part of that is that augmentative and alternative communication for some students, or AAC, that so many, I know, speech therapists today and so many of us are familiar with. This is something I came across recently that kind of surprised me back in 2012. So there's been some time that's passed, and maybe this has changed. But a collaborative project found that only 60%, or rather, not only that 60% approximately of all our students who communicate with pre and emergent symbolism lack access to AAC. So unfortunately, I think we're missing the ball with some of our kids. We're missing that mark to give them the communication that they so desire. I always think about myself, and I know I have my own experiences and it's for me personally, but if I couldn't communicate in the ways that I want to communicate, I would be incredibly frustrated, and it would just spiral me down into, a place I don't want to be. So yeah, we have to.
Can I jump in? Can I
Yeah.
jump in and share something really quickly? I supported all of the city of Chicago for assistive technology. We had a great team of speech and language pathologists who were working with the team. And there was a student, and I'll make this brief, but it's just a really impactful moment in my educational career when it came to communication. There was a student named Eli who was a third grader who every year there was a battle between his parents and the school about whether he was going to go into the essential skills classroom to be a part of that world, or whether he was going to go into the gen ed classroom where he had no movement of his body, no communication system in place. And there was nobody was wrong with that communication, with that fight. But ultimately, every year the parents won, which meant that Eli was wheeled into the classroom and he sat in the back of the gen ed classroom and sat there. And so in the third grade, one of our SLPs discovered that he had a spark in his eye. And she said, I don't know what it is, but I just want to figure some things out. They discovered that if they utilized an eye gaze system, which calibrated the computer mouse with his eyes, that he could move a mouse on a screen and access a communication board and type using his eyes. And what they found was that he was on grade level. Like after all of those years of him sitting in the back of a classroom, and they didn't even have any idea, now I'm going to cry. They didn't have any idea that he was absorbing all of that information the entire time because he had no way to get it out. Forever has changed my world about what it might mean. And that's that presumed competence piece too. So sorry to bust in, but I just would be amiss if I did not share my why with that.
Absolutely. That story is so impactful, I think. Because we don't know what's locked into our students. That just needs to come out with that right, that right tool, those right strategies, that right person, right? And so we all want to be that person, and we want to make sure that we're entertaining all opportunities and we're looking at all those options, and we're not giving up. I want to point out a little plug here for Patins, that we can really support you in your journey to find a student's communication tool. So we have a team at Patins. I have 3 colleagues from left to right: Jessica Conrad, David Jackson, and Lisa Benfield. And you can reach out to them by filling out a Google form, which is a consultation request. And they will get out to you virtually and possibly in person to start trialing some things, to offer you support along the way, to train you and the student on how to use the tools, because we know we can't just plop an iPad in a student's hands or into the hands of an educator who's including it in a gen ed setting. They need to make sure that they know how to use those and are modeling. Yes, I will grab that consultation link right now, and I'll put that into the chat for you.
I honestly just chatted this, but I don't know what we would do without the support of the Patins teams with our communication. They are so great, and whether they're in person or, as it's turned out over the past year, or virtual as it has been, it's been life-changing for so many kids to have them in there.
Yeah, the communication team just works so hard, and they are the most passionate people about ensuring a student has that access to communicate what they need, what they want, all of the above. So some things I want you to think about when it comes to embedding communication. What? Rachel's got a visitor.
I do. Like, they don't care about me at all. And then I've decided to talk to 70-some people, and here they are.
What does this embedded communication look like outside of, this universally designed environment we've set up for students, the visuals that we've got in place? Some things that Rachel mentioned earlier are seen here in this image on the left that I'm going to let Rachel tell you more about.
Absolutely. So that is one of our SLPs in Greenwood, and that's Natalie Grissom, and she's doing an online lesson as she learned how to do last year with the students, modeling and using the AAC device while talking to a student on the other end who also has an AAC device. So it has been really, really cool to see what we've done. That was one of our takeaways from the pandemic that I hope to never ever get rid of, is the reflection of those tools and to be able to move forward.
Yeah, I love seeing in this picture that modeling that's going on through the virtual space, because even though it really probably tried us to figure out how to do these things virtually, we figured it out and we overcame a lot of barriers in that situation, in this virtual situation, so that we could meet the needs of our learners. I also have a quick clip of this video because we've talked about core words, and now we're taking that into the modeling situation. We know we have a list of core words and how important core words are, because that's the majority of our language. And then we have that fringe vocabulary that Rachel talked about that we can create on the fly too. But some core word modeling in this video, I think, is helpful just to see how you can focus on a couple words at a time. We're not just using all the core words all the time. We're starting slow. We're building upon the language we're using, we've learned, and the activities that we're doing in our settings. So let's take a peek here at this video it's about a minute of a clip.
Hey friend, do you want to build with me? Let's make a tower that goes way up, okay? I'm going to put this one on, and then this one. We're going to make it go up so high. Up.
Up.
Do you want to make one go up?
Up.
Here you go. I'll put it on there for you. Up.
Up.
Now this yellow one. Ooh. I hope it doesn't fall down.
Up.
Make it go up some more. It's starting to get wiggly. I hope it doesn't fall down. Ah! All right, bud. Ah! Oh no!
Down.
It fell down. There are no more up. I can't believe it. Okay.
So there's a quick sample, and you can find more words or more videos from Mr. Clay on YouTube if you're curious to see him modeling, or to share that with paraeducators or families at home, because we don't want to embed communication just in the classroom. We want that to exist throughout all of those students' environments.
All right, so I know that we have about 9 minutes left, so we're going to carry just a little bit of more content, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Perfect. I just want to bring to your attention the art of the prompt, because when we are trying to get our students with the most significant disabilities to communicate, we have to be artful in the way that we're prompting them. And we also want to be thoughtful about allowing them to be as independent as possible. So think about ways to motivate response through universal and authentic opportunities to communicate. Build on your students' interests. I can't say that enough, because like the student using the Bluebee Pal, whatever engages that student, those are great ways to get them to respond, and then to celebrate all of those attempts, even if it's a glance or a head turn or a smile. Those are all ways that we communicate. Ensure that that student is communicating for real people and real audiences. They probably get sick of trying to communicate to the same person over and over again. So bring in peers, bring in, other individuals, somebody that's of interest. Think about always, I guess I should rephrase that. Always model all communication for all students. That's how students learn to communicate. And we want to consider less talking and more wait time. So strategies to share for wait time is really just count in your head, to 10, if not longer. I think, if somebody has some strategies that they use for wait time, other than just really having to practice on yourself. I see Rachel says she counts on her fingers. Yeah, that's a great way to do it. You could tap your leg.
I mean, tapping my leg. I don't do this to the kid.
No, I know that, but like I could do that down at my side.
Love it.
And the less talking is, I say wait time, but sometimes we just still talk kids to death even after we've waited. Okay, so what now? Tell me again. And you go through these prompts, these verbal prompts so quickly without giving that student time to process what you're saying.
It's really hard. It's
Yeah,
really
it is.
hard. I'm a person who obviously feels like uncomfortable silence with talking, and my students have had a really hard time. If I have a kid who's processing on a different level, they don't need me to fill that with something that distracts them. So it's something, of course, that you have to practice.
Yeah.
You have to sit with your, family at home.
And I see Heather's comment that it's really difficult for teachers that speak so quickly. I agree. And if you can, in a professional development setting, where it's a safe setting, model this and ask your staff to be students, and you're the teacher, where you're like, hey, did you hear me? What did I say? And kind of prompt them really quickly with some of those prompts that might make them feel on edge, so that they can put themselves in those shoes, the shoes of the students, and how they might be feeling when they never even had a chance. They're still processing the question, 3 ago, because they're afraid you're going to call on them. And now you've asked 2 more questions since.
Yeah.
So here's a hierarchy that you can access. This is a live link on the slide to work through those prompts, from the creating motivation all the way down to increasing that motivation and exposing target vocabulary.
And I think we can probably just solidly end on what UDL and communication means. Basically, communication is all of these things. It's sign language, it's AAC, it's speaking verbally, it's behavior, as Jenna mentioned, being behind with your processing. When you don't process what something says, people interpret that as maybe a behavioral issue instead of you just trying to catch up. So there are so many things that we need to think about with communication. I'm sorry that we don't have time today for the literacy pieces, because Jenna is so good, but I will plug her and say that she will come to your school and talk to you about literacy and writing with your students very easily. So we'd love to open this up for any questions that you might have. Feel free to unmute yourself or utilize the chat box.
Yeah, and know that there are resources here on inclusive writing and thinking about alternative pencils. And my colleague Rachel was my colleague, she's not anymore. But my colleague Jessica Conrad and I do have recordings on reading and writing with significant disabilities. And I'll go grab those while we're taking some questions and share those recordings in the chat, which go through some of these resources in our later slides that we are just run out of time for. So any questions, let us know. And I do want to get this slide up so you have all our contact information.